Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host since the early 1990s, I think, Ken Bialo.
Good evening, Marian.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Just to inform our audience, so probably everyone knows you, you were mayor in the Village of Larchmont for 4 years. You served as trustee on the Larchmont Village Board for 11, and you served in other also unpaid capacities to help the Village of Larchmont.
Key.
So thank you.
As did you, so don't be modest.
Well, not with the years you put in.
Yes, you did. Years on the Board of Trustees and then as chair of the defunct and
You do like to say defunct.
Republican Party here in the village.
You might say missed. Well, so this is sort of a sad time of year because the anniversary of September 11th is coming up, but it's bringing me in to be able to bring up my favorite topic, which is furniture share house.
Yes.
Because George Latimer was talking about things to do on September 11th, and he gave ways for people to donate. And one of the ways that is mentioned is warehouse cleanup at Furniture Share House.
Yep.
So, which goes on every week, right?
More or less.
Okay. So, if you would put up the, we can't really see it very well. It says www.furnituresharehouse.org. Furniturewarehouse.org. No, it's Sharehouse.
Sharehouse.
Furnituresharehouse.org.
Yes.
And you can see what dates are warehouse cleanups, and they would just love to have you help. And there's so much energy and positiveness that's going on there. It's a really great thing. So glad there was a reason to talk about Furniture Share House again.
So you're probably wondering why I'm not wearing my suit coat.
Well, it is out of character.
I told you off air, it's okay to wear a suit coat when you're going to be frivolous, as we mostly are.
Yes.
But tonight is serious business. And so I took off my coat.
So these are your shirt sleeves.
This is shirt sleeves. Roll up the shirt sleeves and get to work. This is about, and I want to talk about, and I know you have some observations to pitch in here also, about the project called Centro or whatever you want to call it, which is a giant monstrosity that the village board seems dead set on throwing into Chatsworth Avenue between the corner store and the Larchmont Tavern. We all know that space. There's a couple of empty storefronts there right now. Why are they empty? Because they're waiting for the village board to pass this amendment to the zoning code. And the village board has given notice of a hearing to consider an amendment to the zoning law with respect to the Centro project next Monday night. Tonight is September 10th, right?
Will be the 16th.
It will be the 16th
Yes.
of November at 7:30 p.m. Everybody, please get on your horse, saddle up, and go. And I want to read from some prepared comments because I'm going to use this in other places, and I want to make sure that I've got it right, and I'm going to do my best with this thing. But the point is, this is a monstrous project. And the village board has proposed an amendment to the zoning code to accommodate this project. And in the village ordinances and in the New York State law, the process is called a special permit. And I have dubbed it, actually, a special person, because I think the person who is behind this Centro project is getting exceptionally lenient treatment, and the proposal is to allow that person to build a 5-story penthouse on the top building in the middle of the block between the tavern and the corner store.
And that's a very small space.
I think the proposal is 66,000 square feet, 70 feet tall, 5 stories, mid-block. My concern, and I think the concern of many people who may very well make their voices heard, is that this will indelibly alter the character of the village. A big box plopped in the middle of the village. And I must say, as I was putting my little notes together, it all reminded me of the IKEA project in New Rochelle back in, when was it, the late 90s or the early 00s. Most of the people out there are probably, were not resident here or too young to remember the big fight about IKEA, but they wanted to put a big box in the corner between New Rochelle and adjacent to the Town of America and the Village of Larchmont. And one of their thoughts was that by their own traffic study, 2 million vehicles would go in and out of the space each year.
Additional vehicles?
2 million vehicles.
God, I
trucks,
forgot that.
cars, bulldozers, I mean, who knows
okay.
what. And I do remember, and it's really the same, it's the metaphor for this, a speech that I delivered in the New Rochelle City Council chambers. There were 3 days of hearings. I spoke first for the Village of Larchmont. And the metaphor that I used, if I remember correctly, was this is a size 12 foot that they were trying to wedge into a size 9 shoe. And the reason I remember that so fondly is because CBS Radio picked it up and broadcast it. And that's when I woke up, I heard myself on the radio. I was like, oh, not bad. That was a pretty good metaphor. Well, it's the same thing here. It's 66,000 square feet. 66,000 square feet, 70 feet tall, shoved into the middle of this block.
And those, at most, aren't they 3-story buildings?
Two-story. They're actually 2 stories going out, and then there's one over on the corner of Vanderburg and Chatsworth, which is a little taller. The September 16th meeting, the meeting that I want everybody out there who hears this, who has the slightest inclination to get involved, will be the first meeting of the village board where the residents of the village will have an opportunity to comment. And I have to say, a project of this magnitude with the potential to affect the character of the village forever requires more than, and that's so far this is the only one scheduled, one steamroller meeting. And I'll tell you why I think it's a steamroller meeting. But what concerns me is that the voices of the village residents needs to be heard. We need to have open government, and this wasn't an open process, and I'll explain that in a minute. There's no realistic possibility, my view, hope you share it, that everything can be heard and adequately assessed at this meeting. The board, I just can't imagine that the board is going to vote on these proposed amendments at this hearing on Monday.
That's the plan, is they'll vote?
I don't know, because they don't tell you, because they haven't told us a damn thing about this to begin with. But here's, in order to do this thoughtfully and carefully and take account of all the village voices that are going to be heard, it can't be a single meeting process. It has to be a multiple meeting process, and not just a multiple meeting process about the building, this monstrosity, but about the proposed amendment to the law. And the reason for that is this is a weird proposal.
The amendment.
The amendment only suits this building. The County of Westchester Planning Board said, while we generally approve, we're concerned about zoning amendments that have been proposed to facilitate this building. As currently written, this would apply only to this one particular site.
That sounds fishy.
Well, it just sounds bad. It just sounds bad, but that's only the beginning. The documentation that was submitted by the developer, which you would expect to present the developer's best face, this is as good as we can make our pitch. This is our pitch, people. Buy the stock, right? Minimizes the effect on traffic, and I'll read you some details later that are just astonishing. That according to them, there will be absolutely no increase from this 66,000 square foot building on the traffic on Palmer Avenue. It's either the dumbest group of people that ever got together or people who were kind of closing their eyes to what the reality is.
Could I just make a point?
Yeah.
Because now, when I have to go in the direction of Palmer Avenue, every time I check with Waze, it is at 5 miles an hour. And this is not just during pickup time at schools or anything. This is constant.
Let me tell you more about the traffic study when we get there.
Okay, good.
All right. So minimal impact on traffic. No impact on schools, according to the developers'
What?
papers. Yeah, so that if you add, you know, in Chatsworth, it's so tight that if you add a kid, you might have to build a whole new building or a new classroom. And they're saying, oh, well, there won't be any kids. And then maybe at most there'll be 2. You know, we know that. We know that. Taxes, ridiculous over-calculations of the value of property taxes in respect of these units, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Self-serving misstatements and specious assertions. But I got to tell you, here's the most troubling part of it. It seems like the village board has accepted these papers, which I'm going to go through, and I'm going to tick off a few of the wildest stuff, right? It seems like the village board has accepted them because on the website for the village, it says the school and traffic studies performed, ready, quotes, show a minimal impact on our infrastructure and school district. Well, I don't see how you could possibly deduce that these studies show anything. They're shot full of errors. They are.
So they aren't relevant at all.
And in particular, the calculation of taxes, which is an astounding numbers exercise in pitch baloney. I pitch you, I want you to buy this thing, and I'm going to give you all the baloney reasons that I can give you, and I'm going to leave it to you to sort out. So you would have thought that there was...
And see if they're accurate or not.
Right, you'd think there was somebody on the other side, on the village side, sorting this out instead of saying, oh, the studies show, these studies, baloney studies, show a minimal impact. I don't know what they're thinking. But here's the key thing. In the studies, in the village website, all over the place, nowhere, nada, is the character and the effect on the character of the village of a monstrosity like this thrown into the middle of Chatsworth Avenue discussed. It's not even adverted to. The word character, I read these papers. And
You're probably the only one.
Maybe so. You see the tags and the yellow highlighter and the red highlighter over the yellow highlighter, the whole thing. Nowhere is the character addressed. Nowhere is the character issue. I don't think my personal opinion, no government, no village government for sure, anywhere should make a decision on a law of this sort and a project of this scope and its impact on the character of the village on a single public hearing and on plans that clearly were developed by the developer, you'll forgive the redundancy, with the assistance of people from the village. And they were kept secret. And I'll tell you why that is. The presentation wasn't made to the village board of this package until April of 2019. The traffic study is dated November of 18. The traffic data, such as it was taken in April of 18. The comments about school taxes and effects on the school district were made in a memorandum directed to the Board of Trustees, not even the developer, to the Board of Trustees on November 1st of 18. This has been cooking for a year and a half.
Who sent that memorandum to the board?
Kimley Horn of New York, PC.
And who are they?
Who knows? Consultants. Supposed consultants. Anyway.
Are they claiming to be independent?
Well, they're not claiming anything. And the information that they've compiled is ridiculous.
Okay.
So we can just laugh about that in a minute.
Okay.
But the plans were developed, they clearly were developed with input from the village, in secret with the village. Nobody was talking about this. Then this thing came public with the developer throwing this package out there in April of 19, and it had been secret the whole time. This is kind of the opposite of open government. Right?
Well, it is.
Right, it's the opposite, and it seems to me unfair to the residents. And I think the September 16th meeting, there should be nothing voted on by the village board. And it should be the first of a series of meetings so the board can actually hear what people are thinking about this, right? Not in secret, but in public, have them televised, let people stand up and say what they think, because I don't think this is going to be very well received. And I will tell you, the piecemeal zoning that this thing represents, and I'm talking about what the county said and what we know has happened here, this can turn the village, and I'm going to say this, forgive me, Mayor de Blasio, This can turn the village into Queens on Long Island Sound. We will be chock-a-block with this stuff, and in fact,
Because we'll just keep doing something for
well,
this
there'll be
building and something for that building.
a special person
Okay.
here and permit. A special permit here and a special person there, permit there, and another special person there, and before you know it, we're going to be so dense and so overrun that the character of the village, and I think this is important for this reason, and on its own merits it fails. And I just note that Mayor Murphy in the Village of Marian has led the board there to enact a new law that says, nope, we're not going to have tall buildings, we're not going to have this sort of density, we're done. And I kind of wish that the Village of Larchmont board would take this proposal, throw it away, start from scratch, and adopt what the Village of Marian has done,
Right.
instead of pretending to shove this down our throats. Having said that, and
Well,
having
can I
read
just say
the-
there's so much
Yes.
more development. I guess, was it the Hampshire Country Club that is what pushed maybe the Village of Mamaroneck, one of the things that pushed them to stop,
Yeah, so they were, I forgot the number that
which
they're
we
proposing.
still have to deal with because it's still
yeah.
going on.
Yes,
It
that's
snuck
exactly
by.
right. Well, that's the point. The point is, the Village of Mamaroneck has taken action to deal with overdevelopment, and what I'm suggesting is, instead of our village board running along and
Right.
doing the special person permit,
Right.
there's a combination of the metaphor. Instead
The
of doing that.
baloney special person
Well, I mean,
permit.
just if you look at the papers, we'll look at the papers in a second.
Okay.
But I've told you about the village website. I've told you about what the County of Westchester said. I haven't told you that the village planning board has written a letter, I don't know, it's 3 or 4 pages.
Did they
with a-
review this stuff?
With a whole bunch of comments. I have no idea what they reviewed.
Okay.
It's not, that wasn't, they didn't share that with me.
Okay.
But their comments, they have 8 or 9 or 10 specific comments. And their first comment is, if you do this, you have to expect other people will want to be special person permits also.
Right.
That's not a good idea, because that is exactly the concern that we have. That's their first concern, that this will lead to others,
Which implies influence.
which implies more density and more monstrosities in the middle of streets in the village, and doesn't mention the character of the village.
Right.
Now, they have a whole bunch here, that, to the planning board's credit in Larchmont, there's a whole bunch of comments they've made. They've noted that 70 feet is a little tall. They've noted there's no setback. They have this and that and the other thing. And they did note, and this was so interesting, they said that they thought that the village board ought to turn to the Board of Architectural Review for help and advice on the way this thing looked. And all of that is consistent. That kind of comment coming from the planning board is sort of consistent with what I had heard, and I don't remember the source, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you anyway, that the village actually the board hired its own consultant to help with this, instead of following the usual village processes and relying on the expertise of the volunteer boards.
Of the people that live here
Board
and
of
care.
Architecture Review, yes. And so I find that a little scary also. This whole thing scares me. It's just not, it's an exercise in what's open government, what's the opposite? Closed government, non-open government.
Right.
But having said this, I know that the people who are going to defend the board, including members of the board, will say, this hearing on Monday night is not about the project, it's about the law, it's about amending the zoning code. And I just point you right back. The answer to that is right back to the county, which says, this is pretty specific to this particular spot. Unusual, it's odd. It's odd. It is odd. It's also odd that the board has been working on this for, what, over a year? And it's odd. This is the first public meeting where you can actually talk to the board about something they've been working
Oh,
on
okay,
for a
because
year and
things
a
have been
half.
in the newspaper, but there
Yeah.
hasn't been any chance to talk to anyone.
No, it hasn't. Well, you can talk to the planning board. If you wanted to go to the planning meeting, you could have listened to their
Okay.
comments back and forth. You could have sent them comments in writing. The planning board isn't making the decisions. The board has proposed this. The board is the one that's pushing this. The memorandum from Kimmel and Horn, or whatever their names are, was to the board in November of 2018. It's 10 months later, and now the board is first going to have comment from the public. That just seems to me to be too long. It's odd. It's odd. it's odd because we are told that the board themselves not only received this in November, but actually worked on the papers. I don't know that that's true either, but I did hear that that was scuttlebutt. It could be just made up stuff. I don't remember where I heard it. And again, I wouldn't tell you if I knew. But, you know, you get old, you can't remember everything. So that's, that's that. And what's really weird is that this special treatment for this developer is in the face of the fact that this, as far as I can tell from the developer's own literature, this is the biggest project this developer's ever worked on, maybe twice the size of anything that he's ever worked on before. He's got some gruesome looking thing in Pelham. just gruesome, right? But it's weird that this kind of this sort of treatment would be accorded to somebody who wasn't somebody who had done this a lot and was a standard person, and they developed 4 apartment buildings in Stamford and 2 in Rye, and they were well known in these parts.
Right.
This is somebody who's coming in with this big box idea. And it's odd because the developer's submission is just chock full of ridiculous stuff. And you might say, well, Ken, are those tags on pages that you're interested in? And the answer is they most certainly am. This is their environmental impact statement. And it goes about 10 or 12 pages, and it answers questions that are on the form that is provided by the New York State DEC. And I have tagged a few of the funnier items. First, it says, is there a comprehensive land use plan? Which includes, this is a question from DEC, which includes this particular site, and the check is no, and that's not right. The check is yes, there is, and in fact, it was submitted as part of the county's submission in respect of the special master proceedings about affordable housing. I believe it was, I can't remember, it was 66 or 68, and then it was amended in 86, and it hasn't been amended since. But the idea behind a comprehensive plan, and the reason that's such an important question, is when you buy into something, you buy a plot on a block, right? Your house is there. It's good to know that the day after you buy it, the village government isn't going to come in and bulldoze it over and make it into a tennis court. And that's why comprehensive plan gives you an idea of the way things are going to develop. So when you buy, you can buy in confidence. The people who bought on Went Avenue, which is the back of this monstrosity parking lot that's proposed with this building, didn't buy into a 3-story or whatever it is garage made of brick leaning all over their property.
Right.
They bought into a nice little street which had some traffic, yes, because there's an open parking lot there, but not a gigantic structure.
Right.
So comprehensive plan helps people who are looking at where they're buying and what they're buying for to appreciate. We only have 5 minutes. Well, that's terrible because we got some fun stuff. Anyway.
Well, we can continue in October.
Well, we're not. We're going to get this done before this meeting on Monday. What parks serve the project site? Answer, Memorial Park. What are you talking? What is Memorial Park is in the town of Mamaroneck. What about Vanderburg Park? What about Chatsworth School Park? What about Pinebrook Park? And the reason they misstated that, it seems to me, is that later on, when asked, are there any facilities that serve the disabled or serve children within 1,500 feet of the proposed site, they answered, no. Well, that's silly. The school's down the street, and those 3 parks are all around there. And this sort of helped them, my guess is, get around the idea that they had to deal with these parks as facilities that would attract children, so they could say there aren't going to be any children. Just put the bits and pieces together.
That's outrageous.
Funny. Well, I don't know. I don't know that that I'm saying what they were thinking. I do know that what they said on this form, what they said on this form doesn't fit with the realities. All right. They also said construction solid waste, 0.25 tons per month. You know what 0.25 tons is? 500 pounds. A month for construction debris? That's just as silly. All right. That's just silly. Now.
Whoa.
That's the environmental stuff. There's lots more in there. I got lots of tags on there.
Okay, we have about a minute.
I know. The traffic study was done. says there will be no additional traffic on Palmer Avenue, and the amount of additional traffic on Went Avenue, which is from time to time covered with floodwaters, will be like 3 cars.
That's outrageous.
3 cars. The funny part about this one is, and I've shown you the diagrams, but the data that they rely on to derive from the state, New York State Department of Transportation data, didn't study this at all. It studied the road called Larchmont Avenue, not Vanderburg, not Palmer, right? Not Went. From Palmer to Boston Post Road. And when was its study done? November of 2010. Very current data. Very current data, right? That's the kind of stuff that you want to use for your traffic study.
That's ridiculous.
Last but not least, we have 30 seconds. I'm going to give you this in 30 seconds. In terms of the tax effect of this project, these guys value their project at $35 million, and then they multiply that times something that they call the school tax rate of $13 or something per thousand. What they don't tell you, of course, is that this $35 million is not going to be the assessed value, because these are going to be condominiums. They say they're going to be 23 condominium units, and there isn't a person in this county who doesn't know that condominiums are assessed at maybe 25% of a similar value in a private single-family residence. So putting that number in of 35 million doesn't have any discount in it for the fact that these are condos, and that the effective tax rate for condos is way lower. That is a joke. And as you see here, what was my note?
Baloney.
Baloney. Baloney.
Well, I certainly
Come
pray.
on Monday night.
I pray you will be there.
Come on Monday night, because there's so much more fun to be had, and we don't have the time to have it.
Well, I mean,
Maybe we'll have it. Maybe we'll have more fun at the next meeting. And I don't know.
well,
joke.
I mean, it's so fun it makes you really want to cry.
Well, the point is, I don't know what was deliberate and what wasn't deliberate. That's not, the point is not to cast aspersions on other people, but to say, if this is the quality of the information that they're providing, there were no parks nearby. I mean, this is the quality of the information they're providing in this form, and the sort of calculations that they're doing. They really don't know what they're doing. And that's scarier to me, that the
Right.
village board would say, the studies show minimal impact, with this kind of misinformation and lots more. That's the scary part of this process. That's why we need an open set of hearings, and that's why we need to inspect this thing and consider it carefully, and not just go along with the idea, oh, gee whiz, this is a great idea because the village board has been pushing it secretly, if that's the case, and I believe it is, secretly for the last year and a half. That's a problem. That's a problem for me. And with that, we sign out. Probably over our time.
Thank you so much. I
Well,
appreciate
thank you for
it.
listening.
Well, it's terribly important to have a watchdog like you.
I don't know that a watchdog is the right way I would describe it. This is just somebody who reads the papers.
Well,
Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the talent on the other side of the cameras.
Talent and patience.
And patience.